So, hormones.
Yes.
Enormous topic, obviously. But we're going to talk about two groups of hormones now that have the greatest impact on the female voice.
Yeah.
So one is sex hormones and one is thyroid hormones. We could probably just talk all year about each one, but we'll try and condense it into something that's useful. So first of all, with a thyroid then, so this is something that I have to be honest, as a voice teacher, it wasn't something that I knew an enormous amount about, the thyroid gland. I know that it sits essentially kind of on top of the larynx. It has a very close connection to the sort of laryngeal tissue. And I know I've had clients before that have had thyroid surgery and it's kind of impacted the voice. So I know that the thyroid absolutely can impact the voice. An underactive thyroid, an overactive thyroid can have very distinctive problems for the voice. Can you just talk a little bit more about the thyroid, what its purpose is, and then also we can talk about then, are there things that we can do if we are aware that we have an underactive or overactive thyroid?
So the thyroid is part of an axis of glands which control our hormones. It is so yes, you're right, it sits just here at the bottom of our throat. And it's the thyroid hormones. There's two of them, and they're kind of T4 and T3 are the name of them. There are some more biological.
Sounds like Heathrow Airport.
Yes. The hormones produced by the thyroid are what control our metabolism, which is why quite often people, when they have hypothyroidism, they are likely to put on weight, and people who have hyperactive thyroid are likely to lose weight, although that's not always completely true either, but that's generally how it tends to happen. What I would say, there's a hormone you've not mentioned, but I'm going to mention it because it's really important, because it's actually a master hormone that controls everything, and it's cortisol.
Yes.
Cortisol is the stress hormone.
Yes. So is that produced from the thyroid?
No, it's produced by the adrenals. But
right.
But it can control what then happens in the thyroid. And it also can control what happens with our sex hormones.
Well, I was going to say that actually, because I did a little bit of research on this. So the thyroid actually helps to control our menstrual cycle.
Yes.
So it's all interconnected, as always.
It's all interconnected, and hormones are just a big soup. All in a bucket. And if we have too much of one thing, it can stop another one coming out, and vice versa. So too much of cortisol can slow things down, both with our thyroid and our sex hormones. Not enough cortisol can also slow things down. So it's, as with everything, it's all about balance. I mean, we go back to balance, and just a very brief word on stress, because we often talk about stress in a really negative way, which I mean, absolutely it can be negative, but I think a lot of your clients that you work with will probably relate to that. When we are under pressure, whether we're going to perform on stage, whether we're giving a big presentation for work or whatever, what tends to happen is we get a little bit of adrenaline, we get a little bit of cortisol, and actually we give the performance of our life.
Yes.
And that's when stress is a really positive thing.
Yes.
Stress is what allows us to perform beyond the capabilities that we think we have. This is what allows us to run for our life. If we're, under pressure, or, being, under attack from lions in the jungle, or if we're in a corporate or in a, entertainment setting where we need to perform for an audience.
Yes.
So stress in that way is really, really positive. When stress becomes chronic, that's when it's not so positive, because it shuts down a lot of processes that need to happen. And one of those processes is digestion. So that's why earlier we were talking about, stress impairing our stomach acid production and thereby our digestion. So, we don't want chronic stress. Chronic stress is not a good thing. And in that context, we then have the thyroid. So coming back to the thyroid, your thyroid will produce two hormones, T4 and T3, although with T3 it's a little bit more complex than that. But one of the things that stress will do, if you have too much cortisol, is it will make your thyroid hormone inactive. So instead of having active hormone that you can use in your cells to fire up your metabolism, what it's doing is it's turning that hormone into an inactive form so that you don't have the fuel or the hormone to essentially fire up. And you may think that's an inconvenience, and yes, it is generally an inconvenience for us in our lifestyles, because we're constantly on the go. We're constantly wanting to go. We never stop. But the body is really, really smart. The body does this to force you to rest. Again, we go back to nothing in nature happens without a reason or without a purpose. And the reason why the body is doing this is to force you to rest. And so that is one of the reasons why sometimes we may have underactive thyroid, is because we have too much cortisol, we've got too much stress going on, and the body is saying, hold on a minute, I can't keep going in this way, can you please take a break? And because we don't do this without our body, we try and push on, eventually the body says, stop, no more, you need to rest now. So that's stress is one of the reasons why we may have thyroid issues.
And actually, so in terms of an underactive thyroid, a lot of the issues that can present themselves with the voice is fatigue, reduced range. It's almost like the body shuts down. It's like, okay, I just give up. I'm not even going to allow you to sing anymore. You're just going to be, your voice is going to go. And so people start to experience their voice kind of just, often the voice lowers. It's almost like it literally just shuts down. It's kind of what you're describing.
And it's, so my teacher, who's a wonderful lady, but she always says, and she says to us, she says, you need to think of that all the time. Sluggish thyroid, sluggish everything. Nothing. If you think, if your thyroid is tired, if you're underactive, nothing will work. So again, digestion will be sluggish. So quite often people who have underactive thyroid will also be constipated, because the digestion, it just doesn't go. It doesn't work. So your voice, it's interesting what you talk about, the fatigue, obviously your muscles, everything, you work at a slower pace when your thyroid is underactive.
Yes. And then the overactive thyroid is interesting too, because often the voice can become rougher, hoarser, and often it can tremble. So it's almost it's almost like an agitated voice in a way. So how would you describe an overactive thyroid?
So the dynamics with overactive are a little bit different. We haven't touched upon everything on hypothyroid, but we will, but it'll make sense. So with hyperactive thyroid, the vast majority of the time, this is because there is an autoimmune dynamic, which is essentially destroying the thyroid, and then you're kind of overproducing hormones. It's very rare. It's a lot rarer than hypothyroid issues. And thankfully, because it's a very serious condition. Hypothyroidism is also very serious, but I think to treat it, it's well, I'm not going to say it's less complicated, because it's also complicated. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot less issues around hyperactive.
Yeah.
And it's an autoimmune condition in most cases, which in that case, I mean, the traditional way of treating it will be certain medications which will lower the production of hormones. You may also go down the route of immunosuppressant medication, or eventually they can go down the route of taking the thyroid out or part of it. So it's surgery, and in which case you then you become hypo because you don't have enough, you don't have thyroid to produce the hormones, and then you're on medication for the rest of your life.
Yes.
So it's which is hormonal replacement therapy. So hyperactive thyroid is a very very serious condition that obviously you want to treat and you want to resolve. I work a lot with people with autoimmune conditions, and I have a client actually who had a hyperthyroid condition, and she's turned it around and she's now without medication. And as long as she's sticking to her healing protocol, then fingers crossed she should be fine. So it's possible to help to create a state of remission of autoimmunity with nutrition and lifestyle, careful management of your lifestyle.
Yeah. So is it a similar way of viewing your diet in terms of the other things we've talked about?
Yeah. It all goes down to immunity and regulation of your immune system. So with autoimmunity, there's loads of different reasons why that's happening, but definitely nutrition and having the right nutrition for your immune system, and making sure that your nutrition isn't actually creating an immune response. And that's all the sensitivity stuff we talked about. So
yes,
being intolerant to dairy or gluten or other foods.
And also you mentioned about cortisol, which is interesting too, because you mentioned, having some of cortisol running through the body actually helps us to deliver a better performance. If we're talking about performing, one of the things that I have found when I have night after night of performance, I can't sleep. And presumably that's because there's too much adrenaline pumping through my body.
So adrenaline and cortisol are the stress hormones, and adrenaline tends to be, so often it'll be adrenaline when you're kind of on the spot, having to perform. It's often adrenaline, which is the first hormone to come out. That's the acute kind of short burst hormone for stress, and then cortisol takes over, and that's what allows you to sustain things for longer.
Right.
But cortisol works in balance with melatonin,
the sleep hormone.
So if you have too much cortisol, eventually what happens is, so you need the cortisol to come down for the melatonin to start to come up. And so if you may be, the first night you're probably going to be high on adrenaline and cortisol, which obviously is going to stop you from sleeping very well, and then that may come down. But then after a few nights, the cortisol is what is allowing you to sustain your performance for longer. And so it's a fine balance.
Yes, that is something that I have really struggled with, and I do wonder how people that go on tour actually manage. I don't know how. I must need sleeping tablets.
I mean, for sure you can take melatonin, which again is fine for short term, because your body is not stupid. If you give it something in a capsule or in a drink, it'll kind of stop doing the work it has to do in order to get it, because it's like, well, I've got enough, so then you can end up having some challenging. But you can take short term, you can definitely take melatonin. kind of using, I use essential oils a lot, and that can be really helpful to just kind of help your body relax and then allow that kind of shift to happen. So lavender, chamomile, there are some amino acids, again, things like glycine and L-theanine. They are amino acids which are part of can help make neurotransmitters which are calming, like GABA and serotonin. So again, that can be helpful. And then the last thing, which is something I found out almost by mistake or by luck, as you do sometimes, but drinking tart cherry juice is actually, I can't remember if it helps your body makes melatonin or if it's actually got melatonin in it, but tart cherry juice is a great way of getting your melatonin up. And so when you're on tour, you could have a glass of hot cherry juice after your performance.
That's right.
It takes about an hour to work. So, time it so that it works for your bedtime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. And presumably things like alcohol don't do anything to kind of, no, it's all part of the lifestyle, unfortunately, but yes.
Yeah, so alcohol is a really problematic one for sleep, and especially as women age, it becomes more problematic with your hormones. And alcohol gives us a false impression that it helps us to fall asleep, because it does. It helps you produce GABA, which is a relaxation neurotransmitter. But once the alcohol has cleared, then you wake up and then you're completely wired and you can't go back to sleep.
Yes.
So alcohol is, and I can't remember now the exact reasons why, but that gets worse with age as well. So, I know, in my 20s, it was not a problem sleeping with, having drank too much. And now it's like a glass of wine and I can be wired at 3 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as you say, you fall asleep, because that's often something that I find. I have a glass of wine, particularly if the room is warm, I'm like out, and then but then you wake up at like 2 o'clock in the morning and you can't get back to sleep. So yeah, it's interesting, because I think that there is more education out there now, but I certainly think it has gone along with the lifestyle of being a performer, and late nights, drinking, going to bed late, all of that stuff is not great. But I think we are, I don't know, I feel like that there is a movement now where people are becoming more conscious and aware of their bodies, and even with this sort of rise of vegan food and vegetarian food. So I feel like things are changing, but I still feel, as we were talking about the cortisol and adrenaline, I that's certainly something that I have to manage personally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I can imagine being on the road, and I never, obviously I didn't perform, but I was, working in corporate, and you're traveling and you're, and you have a big meeting, and then you go for a meal and, alcohol, and you stay up late, and then, so yeah, there's definitely an element of the lifestyle.
Yes.
And maybe social pressure. I definitely would say there is social pressure. Still, you're not fun if you want to sleep, 9 hours or not drink, or.
That's right. Exactly. But yes, I think, but certainly I think I've had to view it differently. And actually, I'm like the most boring person now when I'm doing any performing. Like, I don't drink any alcohol. I'm like on herbal tea and water, and I'm just, I'm super healthy. But then that's why I'd get really frustrated that I couldn't sleep, because I'm like, well, I haven't even drunk any alcohol, or, I'm eating really healthily. So, but anyway, that's
very well be, it could very well be why. Yeah. But it's like, athletes, Olympians.
Yes.
Nobody would question them having to go to bed early, having really good nutrition. They will have a whole army of people looking after their physical health.
Yeah.
but we don't view the same for whether people work in the corporate environment or whether, you know, artists or whatever. It's like this is your muscle. I mean, obviously it is, you know, and if that gets damaged by whatever it is you're doing, you don't have your tool anymore that allows you to perform.
No, that's right. That's right.
You know, and it's the same with, you know, corporate people who, you know, I mean, the brain is massively impacted by, you know, arguably everybody uses their brain, but in a corporate setting, you know, they don't use their muscles or their voice or whatever in the same way. But, you know, the brain performs so much better after a good night's sleep, and nutrition and hydration and all of that. So
definitely, yes, absolutely.